Hello and welcome back to the John and Letty podcast. Today we're going to be speaking about a very important subject, something that affects all of us, which is a reality of life, and that is the area of finances.
And today we're going to continue with our series on how to live debt-free. We have talked about biblical principles that you can apply in your personal life to live debt-free, because it is not God's will that we will be bound by our finances.
Right. In the other podcast, we spoke about certain principles that can be applied to help you in this area. But in particular, today we want to speak about practical things. In other words, how were such things applied in our lives to make this happen? Mm-hmm. And of course, one of the things in our podcast is we go through a biblical worldview, because we have found that what the Bible says gives results, positive results. And in fact, it is a way that I can actually compare every other teaching, every other seminar. And you can go to a financial seminar, and as so far as it aligns to what the Bible ultimately says, yes, you're going to find that it actually works. But if you find things that don't align, those things are not going to work. So it actually gives me a measure, a way to determine what works and what doesn't work.
And that is exactly what we have done in our lives. So this particular episode is going to be a little bit more personal, because we're going to be talking about what we have done throughout the years, which is based on biblical principles to work in our finances. And we can say that today we live debt-free. So we want to share with all of you what we have done all of the years that we have been married. We've been married almost 37 years, and we have applied these principles, and we are debt-free.
Yes. Now, there's one thing that you also have to consider, is that there are different stages in life. Mm-hmm. There's stages in life, for example, when you're young, you depend on your parents, and at that point, you kind of don't have any care in the world. Yeah. Your parents are carrying that burden. But then comes to the point that you start to grow up, you graduate, or you have a career, and at that point, you find that you have to be personally and financially responsible for yourself. Then when you're married, now it's two people, and then comes the need for a house, then comes the need for transportation, then comes children, then comes education, then comes college, then comes worrying about retirement or older age, because then when you become to a point that you can no longer work, well, what's going to happen then? Are you going to depend on your kids or society to have to take care of you? You could plan for these things and be in a good position throughout. But we understand that there are times that you may have to incur debt unless you came from a family that's very wealthy. But if you're going to work your way up, one of the most amazing things of living, say, in a country like the United States, is where you can come and you can begin with nothing and actually apply these principles, and end up in a very good financial situation and be able to pass that on even to your children.
And that's right. And we are at the stage of our lives that we are already thinking of retirement. Not that we're going to retire anytime soon, but we are thinking about it because we need to start planning for that next season of our lives.
Yeah, planning can't happen when it's about to happen. Planning has to start way before, so that you're ready when the moment comes.
Yes, but we're going to share what we did throughout all of these years when we were students, and we can start with that. Sure. One of the things that we did, we were both students, and I had a job, and you had a job as getting your doctorate degree. You had a job. So ever since we were married and we were students, we knew that there was a biblical principle that we couldn't overlook in our lives, even when we were students and we didn't have very much. And that was the principle of tithing. And that we have applied when we had nothing, meaning that from the nothing that we had, we always gave to the Lord what belongs to the Lord.
And the concept is in tithing is that it's not just giving it has to be a certain amount. It's a percent.
A percentage.
So that means that if you make very little, that means what you give is objectively little. But what happens as you start to grow, as you start to become more prosperous, then the amount you give becomes bigger, but it's still the same proportion, the same percentage. So it's a way to grow. And I think there's certain benefits to tithing. Number one is it's a spiritual law that helps people to be prospered. In other words, God asks us to do this for us to be givers. And there's many biblical verses that speak about this. And we actually talked a little bit about this, but you could mention one or two.
Yeah, like for example, the Bible says in Luke 6:38, it says, give and it shall be given into you. So if this principle, if you apply this principle to your life, and you give, you tithe, you know that you can expect because God will give you in return.
Yes, and so this giving creates an attitude in you that keeps you from something that's very bad, which is the love of money or avarice.
Yes.
So the Bible also speaks against these traits. And if one way to get over this, one way is to force yourself to be a giver. Now, of course, you can give tithes, you can give offerings, but you can actually even plan to have some spare money for people in need.
Yes.
And as you read throughout the Bible, God is concerned with people in need.
Yeah.
Now, it's not that you have to maintain someone continually, but you ought to be able to help people when they are in need.
Yeah.
So cultivating a life of giving actually will help you throughout your life be a generous person. And there's something that's very interesting, which is sometimes you say, well, I don't want to give because then I'm going to be short. But then you don't give and something happens and you still lose that money.
Yeah.
So I have found that operating in what we could call faith,
yes,
and doing something in faith, and then there is and God backs it up.
Yes,
that's all
and that's
I can
actually
say.
Another principle that we have applied throughout our lives, to believe in God for our provision. And I can confess that in the beginning, remember that I struggled with tithing and with giving because I come from a background that I had nothing. So my mentality was to think that if I give from the little that I had, that I will be left without, and that I will have lack. But slowly I started to learn this principle and listening to the Word of God, and also testing the principle, because the Bible even says, test me in this.
Yes.
So testing this principle slowly, my mind started to change, and that stronghold of my mind about holding on to the money, that came down, and I opened up to the possibility of giving and seeing what happened. And we learned that we can trust in God for our provision.
Yeah, and in fact, there's another component to giving. First of all, it keeps you from avarice. It keeps you from the love of money, and it blesses other people. It helps other people in need. But there is something else in it that all I could say is like a law that God has put, which is that giving or doing something for others brings satisfaction.
Yes.
And this is something that you have people that have all the money in the world, that have all the fame in the world, and all of a sudden they don't know what to do. They find no value, no meaning. They finally stick themselves to some kind of a cause. Oh, let's give to this. Let's give to that. Now I have all this. Well, let me give it to that. And the reason that they do it is because it actually generates a sense of satisfaction. I think God put that sense of satisfaction in us. So this is why Jesus says it is more blessed to give than to receive. Because a person that gives not only is touching others, but also they themselves. There is a spiritual satisfaction that comes out of it. And then, of course, all the other spiritual principles that follow, which is that it shall be given back to you, that it is something that honors God, that's something that is what God wants for other people to get out of, financial need and those kinds of conditions.
So we learned that by giving, we were never without.
Exactly.
We never lacked anything.
Exactly.
And we're talking, this is when we were still students.
Yes.
So what we saw was the hand of God over our lives and our finances. And we were never without anything. We were able to travel back home whenever we had vacations and things like that. So we saw early on in our lives, when we were very young, that this principle of giving tithing and giving the tithe and giving to other worthy causes, people that were in need. We even gave to animal rescue places and things like that. And it gave us a lot of satisfaction. And we saw the faithfulness of God in our lives.
Yeah, even to this day, there are organizations that can help people throughout the world. And we participate in those things. So our giving is in various areas.
Yeah.
So don't just concentrate on just one thing. Have some diversification in it.
Yeah.
And you're going to see that it'll be a great blessing.
Yes, we've given to children's causes, animals, ministries, many ministries, people in need, and we have seen the satisfaction, we have seen the blessing of God, and we see that God prospers us as we give.
Yes.
So let's talk about another principle that we have put into practice in our lives, which is being diligent. And the first thing that we did was to be diligent with studying, preparing for our future. That was one of the things that we did. And then being diligent, once we finished school, was working hard. So let's talk about that.
Well, I think diligence is something great because you can begin at any time.
Yeah.
So if you said, up to now, I really haven't done it, I've just been maybe working or maybe just getting by. At any moment, you can say, okay, today's the day. From this point on, I'm going to make a commitment to be a diligent person.
Yeah.
Now, it takes discipline. It takes self-control. You have to push yourself.
Yeah.
It's a drive thing.
Perseverance.
But it has huge rewards. So if you would ask me, at what point was I diligent? Basically, since I've been a kid. I've known about that. Going to being diligent in high school allowed me to get to good universities. Being diligent at the good universities then gave me the opportunity to work in good employment.
Yeah. And
then being diligent in those places of employment gave me positions of preeminence.
Yes.
And this is one area that the Bible says, in fact, it's in the book of Proverbs, chapter 22:29. It says, if you see a diligent person or a skilled person, diligent person, they will be before kings, not just before anybody. So actually the secret to having, let me just kind of say greatness in a bit, but really that's also connected to income, which is you are specialized in an area, and so your skills are very valuable. And even I can give examples from me, but I can give an example from you, which is when we were in school, you started working as a makeup artist in a counter. So you started to learn about makeup. You started to learn about combinations. And of course, there is also a grace of God upon you. But there's training, there's study, there's preparation, et cetera, et cetera. And so you also were very diligent in that area.
Yep.
And so then different companies actually wanted you and they wanted to have you. And in fact, by the time that you left that career to go to ministry, you had opened any place in the United States to be a trainer for people in this area.
Yep. So that lets me to think that whenever you see people that are successful at something, you see that this person has been diligent.
Yes.
Usually when you see a person that is too laid back,
yes,
that is not a go-getter, maybe that person will, by accident fall into something. But usually when you see people successful at something, behind that success, there is a diligent person.
That's right.
And that's what we saw. And we saw it in your life. We saw it in my life. By the time I finished that career, I was at the top of that career because I was called into ministry. So I let go of that career. But I was being diligent in ministry also.
Yes.
And so were you.
Yes, absolutely. Which is that diligence in ministry comes from the call of God, from that love of God, love of the things of God. But I just wanted to mention two more things, which is one, you were working even at a store.
Yeah.
And they had goals for the whole department.
Yes, I remember.
And you would say, well, when people come in, they're talking, they're having their coffee, and I'm going to with the customer. I'm after that. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. I'm always working.
No time.
And so wasted no time. Yeah. And so the result of that was that you by yourself made the whole goal that was for the whole team.
Yes.
And so the company saw that, and they would reward you.
Yeah, yeah.
They would give you actually percentage of what was sold as a way to reward you. And then also, even after you left that, and then you were working on your own, There were opportunities. Well, because people saw the work that you did and the work ethic.
Yep.
And so that word spread around.
Yep.
And as a result, you were able to ask for much higher prices. In fact, prices that today would seem, wow, this is kind of high. And people still paid it willingly because of the product that they had. So diligence is very important. Of course, in my case, we see the diligence in every area. And if I had continued in my original career, it opened all kinds of doors. In fact,
it did.
Exactly. It had opened great doors. But at that point, because of the calling of God in my life, then I shifted into what God wanted me to do and left that behind. But the principle works nevertheless. It doesn't matter what you are called to do. It doesn't matter what are your skills. You need to be diligent in it and increase your skill in it. And what will happen is that people will pay more for your skills. And of course, in the equation of how to get out of debt, it's not just what comes out, it's what comes in. The more that comes in, then the easier it is to get out of debt if you are a good steward. Because a lot of people have a lot of it coming in, but just as it comes in, it goes out.
Yep.
And as it goes out, they're still always in the same condition. So that's why the principles that we're talking about help people to get out of that condition.
So being diligent helped us to advance in our careers. At that point in our lives, after we graduated from school and we started working, we were diligent by working hard. We were diligent by having a good, work ethic. And we saw that we were being blessed financially and in career and everything. So then, because we were being blessed, we needed to be good stewards, like you're saying. Exactly. If we would have wasted all of our money and everything, so what we did is that we put into practice another biblical principle, and this was to set our priorities and plan ahead. So early on, we started to look into what are the things that are important to us that have to do with finances, and let's start working on a plan. And you were the one that initiated this in our household. We already had little kids, and we started to think about what is important to us, and we started to put a plan in progress. Like the first thing that we did was to pay our student loans.
Yes.
That was one of our priorities.
Exactly.
And then, obviously, because we were forming a family, our next priority was to have a home, to buy a house.
Yes. So we actually, when we bought, as soon as we graduated and came back to Miami, we went looking for a house. But we didn't come with $0. In fact, even while we were still students, we had been saving money throughout that time so that we had a reasonable down payment even for that time. And so when we came, we looked at different houses and all that, and then we decided on getting into our first major debt, which was buying a house. But of course, at that point, I had come and I had a job, and that job was a job that, because of my diligence before, paid relatively well. So we were able to buy a house, and this is one thing that a lot of people make a mistake, which is they want to have their starter home be comparable to, say, maybe
their dream home.
Exactly. Exactly. And if you do that, you're going to find that you're going to be up to here financially. It will be very difficult to get ahead. It will cause stress in the marriage. It will cause stress in the house. The day to pay bills is going to be a terrible day because you're gonna be playing with how to make ends meet. So I see that a lot of times young people want to start like at the level of their parents. Well, you have to start at the level that you're at, and you will grow into different things. You know, when we were students, we lived in an apartment. And we have people get married, young people get married, and immediately want to buy a 4-bedroom house. Well, you know what? You have to see how much of your income is being taken for that. And what most people say, if you do some research, they'll say that you shouldn't have more than 30%, max 40% of your gross income go into housing expenses. And a lot of people go up way higher than that. Basically, you're setting yourself up to failure and difficulty in being able to get out of all kinds of debts.
And when you do something like that you get on over your head with the finances, it causes a lot of stress. It causes friction in the marriage. So it's not worth it. It's better to start at the level that you're at, and then later in your life, you can upgrade to a bigger house as you advance in your career, as you've saved money. And for us, the reason why we were able to have a down payment in our house when we finished school is because we sacrificed.
Exactly.
And we were working
We
as
lived
students.
in that apartment.
Yeah, we were working as students. We lived at an apartment that was
from the university.
Yeah, the university. It was affordable housing for students because we had a plan. And our plan was that once we finished school, we wanted to buy our first house. So we sacrificed some things. We could have traveled, buy a new car. We could have done other things.
Right.
But we sacrificed all of those years. So when we finished school, we had that little bit of a down payment to buy our first house. And that is what we did.
Exactly. Exactly. So that principle worked, and we applied it then, and we having priorities also is something that you have to decide what are your priorities, because another priority to us was, as we saw the benefit of education, was for our children to have good education.
Yes.
So from the beginning, since they were young, we put them in private schools. So that meant that, okay, maybe you can't get the latest car. A lot of people, their mind is on, oh, let me get the latest, Mercedes, let me get the latest BMW, whatever. Their mind are in something like that to make them feel good, but we have to think ahead.
Yeah.
So, in fact, I would say one of the best legacies that we've left to our children, or a best form of inheritance, is their education. In fact, at this point, if we said we leave you zero, we're going to use up everything and you're going to get zero. Even if we do that, they're not starting at zero. They already have a huge advantage because of an investment that we did before. Of course, we're not going to do that.
Yeah.
But that's the point. We decided that this is a priority. So you have to set up what are your own priorities. Exactly.
For our children, we always had, our first priority was a spiritual legacy, right? But other than that, we decided that our legacy should also be a legacy of education. So we invested in that. I remember we drove that old van. Remember the white van that we had?
Sure.
We paid that. It was a used old van. We paid it cash. And that van took us to and from school for 11 years. As our children were small, we could have had a new car, but our priority was our children's education. So we drove that van until it drove no more. And I have no regrets. It had air conditioner and it drove, and that was most important. So that was one of our priorities, and we planned for it, for our children's education. We also, another priority for us was obviously to be able to pay our bills, our house payment and everything that we needed, and also family vacation time. There was a time that we mistakenly thought, no, there's no money for vacation, and that was a mistake until we learned that this was going to be a priority for our family. So we planned ahead to have our vacation money to once a year go away with our kids and everything. If you plan it and you live within your means, you are able to do everything. It doesn't have to be an expensive vacation. You remember that we will go to the Keys and we will spend minimal, but we had a great time. And those are things that are values for us, and we planned ahead within our financial, ability.
In fact, kind of before, what we would do is we would go on vacation because we didn't have money saved up. You put it on a credit card, and then you spend your time paying it off. So you're doing it in the back end. And then we decided to flip it. And I want to challenge you to try to do this. And this is something amazing, which is there are certain, I think, godly challenges, financial challenges that help you change your way of thinking. And before I continue with this, I'll just give an example, which is when we sent our girls to school, we used to pay monthly because otherwise we would not be able to pay it. But I had a friend, he put his kids in school, and he says, I'm going to believe to pay the whole thing ahead of time. And I'm like, what? That blew my mind. I had never thought about it. Is this even possible? And so at that point, we made kind of the mindset, we're going to do it and we're going to pay ahead of time rather than pay after the fact. and things happen. In fact, when we went into the school said, oh, if you can pay all of this up front, we're going to give you this discount. We're going to give you that discount. We ended up paying less money. Yes. But it changed the mindset. From that point on, I was never thinking, oh, let's pay this monthly. Let's go ahead and pay it all at the beginning. And then the same thing happened with the vacation. So it used to be that we used to pay it after. You know, it's like you eat something and then you pay after.
And it would become stressful because we had all of our other bills and everything. So once our mind switched and we decided that we were going to save and plan ahead for our vacation, the vacation was even more enjoyable.
Right. And then afterwards, you didn't have all the burden. So one example of this, we went on a cruise. We wanted to go on a family cruise. And for that family cruise, this time what we did was a year in advance, we started to pay it off. So come the day of the cruise was paid off.
Paid off.
So we were just able to completely enjoy it and go through it. So maybe you could think of trying to flip things around instead of paying in the back and try to get it out in the front end. And be able to enjoy it. But that required expanding my thinking, saying, yes, this could be done, as opposed to just going like everybody goes and does things.
And it also required planning, financial planning in our part. We knew that we were setting aside this money for our vacation that was coming. So that meant that we had to sacrifice other things and try to work it out that way, because it requires a little bit of planning. But when you do this and you're planning for something that you're going to do, the things that we were sacrificing didn't hurt that much.
Right.
Because we were working towards something, our family vacation. And so we encourage you to try this.
Right. So a lot more enjoyable when you're looking forward to something, as opposed to, oh, you already used it up or spent it and now you're kind of paying in the back.
Yes. Another one of the biblical principles that we have always put into practice is the one about don't overspend and work within your budget. Spend within your budget. So we have never been the type of people that overspend or go for extremely expensive things and things like that are not necessary. We have been wise with our money and really look at our priorities and spend in those things. For example, I'm a person that likes to eat out. I like to go to nice restaurants and things like that. So sometimes we had to cut back and hold on and eat at home more because we were saving for something.
Right.
Or we were, waiting for our vacation. Those type of things, those type of sacrifices to be able to not get into debt. Not getting into debt and planning ahead and living within the means that we have while believing for greater things.
Right.
That has been our financial strategy all through our lives.
Right. So you have to work at two ends, which is the money coming in, the income, and then the money going out. And the money coming in sometimes is difficult to control.
Yeah.
But again, things like being diligent, being skilled, increasing your knowledge, increasing your skills, help to pay off and increase that amount. So then you have to work on this back end, which is where having control of your money, not overspending. There are times that, there's times that you can go ahead and have a splurge on something and whatnot. But there's times that you can't live that lifestyle. And one of the things is that so many times we want to just like look like somebody else.
Yes.
This is a famous keeping up with the Joneses. I want to look as good. I want this. I want that. But at the end, it will affect you terribly. And in fact, if you talk about or if you read about what it says about people who are true millionaires, they're just driving a pickup truck and they're with jeans and a t-shirt. It's not the people that have all the expensive clothing on and all the name brands on. It's not that. That's normally what you don't see.
And that's a burden that people put on themselves.
Yes.
I think we have learned to be content with what we have and who we are. And I don't feel that I need to prove anything. And I think I learned that from you also. And so instead of getting into debt to prove something or to keep up with the other people, that is not a good idea.
Right.
It's better to be content with who you are and what you have and enjoy the blessings that you do have without getting into debt, which will become a burden for you, for your family. So that's another thing, another principle that we have put into practice.
And that really requires wisdom in a sense, because, for example, you can say, oh, I'm going to buy the cheapest pants I can find. Just to give a quick example. Well, you could buy those cheapest pants and they're broken in 2 weeks. So what good was that? Sometimes it actually wiser
end up buying another
to buy, a much better brand. You're going to pay more for it up front, but then it'll say be in style, be classy. So don't just go get buying something expensive that will be out of style or will no longer be used shortly afterwards. So these things require some wisdom as to what you do with your money.
Yeah, and even the dressing classic things that are pieces that are in fashion all the time, and then splurge occasionally in those things that are here for a season and then they go. But having a balance in our spending, that's what we're talking about.
Now, I want to speak about one of the most important keys in the part of getting out of debt, which is a lot of times you hear try to put a little bit on your debt. If you could put an extra $2, $5, and that is good. But an extra $2 and $5 is not going to get you out of debt anytime soon. What you really should do is, in those occasions that you get an amount of money, you need to hit that debt hard. What do I mean? If you get a $1,000 bonus, then hit the $1,000 on that debt. Or at least, $950 and keep $50 for something else. But you have to hit the debt hard. Otherwise, you will have it forever.
Yes.
In fact, the mortgage is 30 years. People try to buy a car and it's like 6 years, 7, 8 years. These are long-term debts. And a lot of the way things are working is they want to keep you in long-term debt. See, before TV was free, now you have to pay every month to get something. Oh, I want to watch this. Now I'm going to pay every month. I got to pay for this. I got to pay for that, the other. And so everything is being made. Okay, you have a car. Now you're going to pay for this 10 years, 8 years, whatever. The thing is that you have to, if you want to get out of debt, you have to hit the debt hard whenever you have that opportunity. Yes, it's a sacrifice, but in the end, it pays off.
Yes, and there's something to be said for being able to erase all that debt and be free.
Yes.
There is freedom in being debt free.
Yes.
And peace of mind. You sleep well at night. You can then give yourself those those things that maybe you couldn't buy before. But the worst thing is to accumulate debt on top of debt on top of debt.
Yes.
To be able to have everything that you want, but at the same time you are a slave to that debt, and you have no freedom in that area, and you don't have peace of mind. So it's better to have peace of mind and enjoy your life than to be burdened by that debt.
Yes, and this takes me to kind of a last point, which, unless you have something else, which has to do with a part of how to make your money work for you. A lot of times what we do is we work for money. Our money in itself is not producing. Well, how do banks work? What they do is they take your money in your bank and then they use your money to lend it to somebody else at an interest rate. And so the bank is making all kinds of money on the fees, on the loans, and on the interest rate, and they never even had the money.
Yeah.
So they actually use it for their own benefit. And that's how they make money work for them. Usually we don't think about that at that point. So what is that called? That's called an investment.
Yeah.
And you really should look into different kinds of investments. Like I say, from the beginning, we've tried many different things for investment, and you might find something that really works for you and go there. But if you want to do the minimal effort, at least this is what we did, that requires minimal effort, is just to put money in the stock market, in a fund that mirrors what are the major indices, which is like you hear about Dow Jones, you hear about NASDAQ, you hear about Standard & Poor's, S&P. If you find something, a fund that has a collection of all those stocks, because what it really is you're not just buying a part of one company, you're buying a part of a collection of companies. So that's part of diversification. It means that if one company goes sour, well, the other one doesn't necessarily go sour. It might actually increase. So it helps you manage your risk. Always an investment is a risk.
Yes.
But a risk brings a reward. And what you find is that the riskiest investments bring the highest rewards, but also they bring the highest risk.
Yes.
In other words, it means you can lose all of your money if you don't know what you're doing. But normally, historically, something as simple as getting an account, getting an investment that you can use that has multiple companies. And this is not a very difficult thing. You can go ahead and search and find out about it. And that will really help make the money work for you. Now, the only bad thing about this is that it takes time.
Yes.
And the more you can actually put in up front, the more it can actually produce. So there's actually a little bit of a struggle between, I want to pay off my debt, but I want to invest some. So you're going to have to figure out an amount that you're comfortable putting in there and investing and having that money work for you. The most modest kind in the past would be put your money in the bank, because the bank pays you interest. But today, bank isn't paying practically any interest, so it's not even worth it. So the other things were certificate of deposit, CDs. This is one thing we did early on. You go to the bank, you give them, say, a few $100s, you say give them $500, and you put it on a CD for about 6 months or whatever. And that means that at the end of those 6 months, now you can't touch that money, but at the end of the 6 months, the bank will give you that money plus an interest amount.
But we saw that, and we did this way back.
Yes.
We saw that the amount that we got back wasn't very good, and the money was tied up there. So we started to research other ways to start to invest a little bit of money, while at the same time we would be applying all of those other principles that we talked already about. We were paying our house, had our children's education. So we started very slowly. We started, but we started, and the thing was to start investing and just to forget about it and not wanting to cash it out,
Exactly. That's the biggest temptation, is to cash it out.
We're waiting for retirement, someday. So that was one of the principles that we put into practice. Even the Bible talks about investing and talks about diversifying your investments, which is what you were talking about, to having many different companies. I'm going to prove it to you. Proverbs 21:5 says, "The plans of the diligent lead to profit, and surely as haste leads to poverty." So planning ahead, investing, and preparing for your future will lead to something good and security in the future. And that is what we have done.
Yes.
Yeah.
And in fact, even Jesus said, who is going to build a tower doesn't first sit down, calculate the cost, and then decide whether he's going to be able to do it and finish it and work it out. So there needs to be a little bit of work on back end. And the best thing you could do for this is just educate yourself. Again, here we're not talking about us as financial planners or investors or anything like that.
We are just normal people.
And this is what we did. We found out this information, we followed these biblical principles, and we found that it did work, and it did help in bringing a lifestyle that you can live and be comfortable and not have to worry or be enslaved to debt.
Right. One of the other things that we put into practice, we always heard that it was good to have money saved for emergencies, for a rainy day. And we didn't have a chunk of money saved for a rainy day, but we had some that we had there for whenever the car broke, whenever we had to buy an appliance in the house. But we saw that because we were being diligent with all of the other things that we were putting into practice in our lives, like not overspending and being good stewards, when the emergency came and we were hit with a big amount, like the car, usually that's, whenever they were getting old, the cars, and then a big amount came, or an appliance, a refrigerator, a dishwasher, something broke at home that was a big expense, we were able to to pay for it. Maybe
Absorb
2
it.
or 3 parts. Yeah, we were able to absorb it because of all of the other things that we were putting into place, implementing that. So when the emergency time came, we had a little bit of a fund, plus we were not up to our necks in debt, and we were able to pay for emergencies.
Yes, so those are kind of the principles that we have applied throughout the years, we have learned, and it doesn't mean there's no mistakes. It doesn't mean that there aren't investments that don't fail.
Yeah.
I mean, there are, but if you take no risk in life, you're not going to get any significant reward. You're going to have to take some risks. There should be calculated risks and things that you are willing to risk in order to obtain a certain reward.
So I guess the best advice will be to educate yourself in this type of things, and then start thinking about your plans and your priority for your life in the long term, and then start putting into practice some of those biblical principles that are proven that will benefit you in the long run.
Yes, and whenever you get a chunk of money, go and hit that debt hard. That's the way to get out of it.
So I think we gave a lot of advice from what we have done in our lives, and I hope that this has blessed your life and has give you at least an idea of what to do, and maybe follow our lead in this and try to implement it in your life. So if you like what we're talking about, we ask you to like this podcast and to share with your friends. And we want to ask you also to write to us. And if you have topics that you're interested in learning about and that we can be of help to you, just write to us and suggest topics. We're going to continue to do this podcast, and I know that it's going to be a blessing to your life.
And the other thing is, I want to give a little bonus. This little bonus is something that we saw, which is that whenever we decided to take a certain step in an area, we would call it even a step of faith.
Yes.
We saw that God backed us up.
Yes, that's
so there
true.
was a component of a grace of God that came upon us to believe, to be able to do certain things. And he was there. And then, if you ask me, I feel he didn't let me down. And every time I took such a step of faith, I saw a backing of God. I saw a grace of God. I saw finances come in. I see things improve. And just to give an example, when our daughter went to college, and again, this is just part of the bonus, when one of our daughters went to college, and we decided that yes, that we were going to keep her there, that we were going to pay, I started to find that opportunities came to me. And then all of a sudden more opportunities came, and then people would pay even double what they would pay before.
Yes.
So I saw that there was a component acting there, which was, and I say it's the hand of God to help us go forward in it. I think he delighted in this happening.
Absolutely.
And when you take such steps, God will be delighted in it.
And he went above and beyond.
Above
Our other
and beyond.
daughter
Yes.
applied to the university, and she got a full scholarship also.
Yes.
So those things that were principles for us, which was our kids' education, they were part of our values. We saw the hand of God coming through in a supernatural way for our children's education. So we can
Yes.
testify that that was the case with us.
Yes. So actually, before we end, I'd actually like to pray for you that God would help you to get out of debt and give you wisdom and give you opportunities for you to be able to be free. Father, I thank you for every person that is watching. I pray your grace and favor, Lord. Give wisdom in the area of finances. Give wisdom to find opportunities. I pray, Father, that you would open doors of opportunities that they might get out of debt as they become faithful stewards of the things that they have, Lord, that you would give them the grace to get out of debt. Father, that you would bless them in their income, that they might be diligent, Lord, that they might increase their skills, Father, and that all those expenses, Lord, that come unawares, Father, we pray that they would stop and that you would give them the ability, Lord, to pay off things and be free from debt. We bless you